You are the left, and you were a prisoner to the extreme left.
You think the Republicans are sort of an extreme fringe party?
No, I don't think that they're an extreme fringe party.
That means they don't have the information.
Okay, but 90% of the voters don't have the information.
Maybe you need to listen to the news when you're in traffic.
StephenASmith just made an appearance on The View, and let me tell you, he completely dismantled the panel with nothing but pure common sense. One person in particular, Sunny Hostin. She came in assuming that because he's black, he'd naturally align with her woke, race-driven talking points. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well for her. Now, let's be real, StephenASmith works for ESPN, which is owned by Disney, meaning he's got corporate overlords to answer to. But on his YouTube podcast, that's where he leans a little more into the realm of common sense, or as some might call it, conservatism. Still, he has to walk a fine line, stray too far from the woke agenda, and his job could be on the line. That's why he didn't go full throttle on The View, but honestly, he didn't need to. When you apply basic logic and reason, the panel's arguments collapse under their own weight. Now watch as Sunny Hostin attempts to pull him into her web of woke ideology, only to get completely shut down. Trust me, you don't want to miss this.
So you think the Republicans are sort of an extreme fringe party?
No, I don't think that they're an extreme fringe party. I think that they're operating against those they believe are extreme on the left. Like, for example, when you talk about the LGBTQ community, I'm a fiscal conservative and I'm a social liberal. I'm fiscal with my dollars. I ain't apologizing for not wanting to pay high taxes to anybody. I'm not apologizing for that, right? But outside of that, I'm pretty liberal. Live and let live, okay? But you had folks on the left that were introducing some things when we got in the whole transgender issue, and they were talking about bathrooms, or they were talking about males transitioning to females and competing against girls in sports and stuff like that. These
That's less than 1% of the population.
I understand that,
But you know what?
StephenASmith just went on The View and completely dismantled the panel using nothing but pure common sense. And the biggest showdown, Sunny Hostin. With her snarky, condescending, elitist attitude, she thought she could corner him with her woke rhetoric. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well for her. But you know what's even more ridiculous than Sunny's attitude? The idea that it's perfectly fine to let biological males compete against women in sports. Let's be real, would the ladies of The View be okay with John Jones stepping into the octagon against a female UFC fighter, or an NFL team crushing and injuring a women's football team, or a men's basketball team completely wiping the floor with a women's team? Of course not. But apparently, if a biological male pretends to be a woman, suddenly his height, strength, and physical advantages just don't matter. Give me a break. This isn't just about safety, it's about fairness. It's about the opportunities, the medals, the tournaments, and the years of hard work these female athletes have put in to reach the top, only to come in second place to a biological male who decided to dominate women's sports instead. It's outrageous. And here's what Sunny doesn't get. Just because something affects a small percentage of the population doesn't mean it's not a major issue. Let's do the math. If there are 350 million people in the US, even 1% is 3.5 million. That's enough for biological males to be competing in women's sports in every town across America. Even if it's just 1 or 2 per high school, that's more than enough to make this a massive problem. Parents don't want their daughters competing against boys who've gone through puberty. It's common sense. But Sunny, she's rich, famous, and thinks she knows it all. She's college educated and smarter than the rest of us, so why should she care, right? Wrong. We all know Sunny has a history of ignorant and divisive takes, so of course she's gonna have an elitist spin on this. First, she goes on a rant about how everyone else is uneducated and uninformed, as if she's the sole expert on every topic. She even has the nerve to say people need to watch more news to get informed, because you know, the media is such an unbiased source of truth.
But I think that's where the mistake is made.
Yeah.
You're saying it's ridiculous. I don't disagree with you. But most of the voters out there don't think like that.
But that means they don't have the information.
Okay, but 90% of the voters don't have the information. If you're out there busting your tail to make ends meet and to pay your bills, and you're going to work every day, and you got a family to take care of, and you got to stay, you're in New York City, you're getting stuck 2 hours of your day, you're stuck in traffic. You understand? You got a whole bunch of stuff to go through. You don't have time to know what you and I know.
Maybe you need to listen to the news when you're in traffic.
Well, again,
maybe
I agree
not.
with that.
Be uninformed.
Or you listen to stuff that's going to take you away from the things that brings down your spirit. And that's unfortunately what most voters are doing.
Let me ask.
Unfortunately for Sunny, most voters are busy living in the real world. Did you see her face at the end of that clip? Pure shock. She can't believe that everyday Americans aren't sitting in New York penthouses like her, drowning in liberal propaganda. Nope. People aren't buying the narrative that Trump is some existential threat to democracy, to minorities, or to women. They're too busy worrying about the skyrocketing price of groceries, rent, and simply making ends meet for their families. And here's what completely blows Sunny's mind. People, regardless of their race or ethnicity, have individual thoughts, priorities, and concerns. Just because they share a background doesn't mean they all think the same way. But Sunny, she just can't seem to grasp that concept. And then she drops this gem. People from South America and Central America want to close the door on the people behind them. Seriously?
I want to go back to what you said about black men being very comfortable with matriarchy, and I agree with that because, you know, black households are often led by a grandmother, black grandmother or black mother.
That statement basically implies that all Hispanics are illegal immigrants, that they all snuck into the country and now want to shut the door behind them because, hey, they've already made it. Not only is that completely wrong, but it's also racist. And for Sunny, someone who claims to be Puerto Rican, to push such a narrow-minded stereotype about other Hispanics. Absolutely baffling. Here's a thought, Sunny. Maybe they migrated here legally. I know that's a tough concept for you to grasp since you seem to think all Hispanics are illegal immigrants. But no, maybe they support stronger borders. Because they're legal American citizens who don't want illegal immigrants coming. Wild idea, right? Let me know if you want any tweaks in and taking their jobs.
However, 55% of Latino men voted for Trump. Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think that economically, they were looking at things. First of all, you've got, in this country, you've got Cubans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Guatemalans, Venezuelans, Colombians, et cetera, et cetera. And if you talk to the Hispanic community, depending on who you're talking to, they think differently. The Cubans think differently than the Dominicans. The Dominicans think different than Colombians. To some, the economy was a priority. To some, believe it or not, it was the border. You had some folks within the Hispanic populace that were encouraging the borders to be closed.
I'm Puerto Rican, right? So the Hispanic community is not a monolith. I agree with you. And a lot of, I think, people that are of Hispanic origin from, let's say, South America or Central America, they're willing to close the door behind them instead of letting somebody else in.
Or maybe, just maybe, they remember why they left their home countries in the first place and don't want to see the US turn into the same disaster. Ever think of that, Sunny? Now, let's talk about the real voting monolith in this country. Black voters. Black Americans overwhelmingly vote for the Democratic Party, yet they remain the poorest racial group in the country. Now, I'm not saying correlation equals causation, but it's hard to ignore the pattern. At the very least, black voters should be split more evenly between parties, just like every other racial group, but they're not, and that's a problem. Now, here's StephenASmith breaking down exactly why the Democrats lost the election. According to him, it's because they've completely caved to the radical far left wing of their party. And honestly, he's absolutely right. Watch this. I've said it before. The Democratic Party has shifted so far left that even traditional liberals and lifelong Democrats now find themselves in the same camp as centrist Republicans. Why? Because their party abandoned them in favor of extreme ideologies. It's a total mess. They turned their backs on core democratic values, bent the knee to the woke radical wing, and alienated everyone who didn't fall in line. Now, voters don't trust them anymore. And here's StephenASmith delivering one final blow to the Democratic Party. Watch this. Let me know if you want any changes.
You are the left. You lean and you were a prisoner to the extreme left in a lot of people's eyes. Well, guess what? Most of America doesn't operate on the fringes. Whether you're left or you're right, you're relatively centrist. You believe in compromise, negotiation, working with one another. Nobody gets to get everything they want. The problem is those on the fringes continuously push for you to get everything you want. They're not about getting things done. They're about getting their way. And if they're not going to get their way, they're about complaining and griping about it because they understand that when you are operating based off of grievance, that's usually what provokes you to get to the polls. And that is why they don't mind feeling aggrieved and displaying and disseminating that kind of message, because they know people are going to gravitate to that. And as a result, that might get them to the polls, you thinking you're going to get what you want as a result of it.
But here's the thing. This is where the confusion comes in. Black voters consistently support Democrats at around 90%. Yet as StephenASmith pointed out, they're also deeply suspicious of the system. But here's the kicker. The system they distrust. It's run by the Democrats. Democrats are the ones pushing for an ever-expanding, overreaching government. They promise free stuff, but at what cost? If you're a hardworking, self-reliant person who doesn't want low-quality handouts in exchange for your vote, the Democratic Party has nothing to offer you. And that's exactly why they've worked so hard to maintain their chokehold on the black community. Because without that voting bloc, their entire system falls apart.
One thing to recognize is this, and I've said this often. When we look at the economy, I remember when Biden came into the office, he inherited about 1.5% inflation. It ballooned to about 9.1% before it ultimately came down to where it is now, right? That doesn't mean anything to minorities. The percentage of inflation, and here's the percentage. Nah. How much does gas cost? How much does the groceries cost, okay? How much does rent cost? How much does my mortgage cost? That's what folks pay attention to, what's actually in their wallet. I don't know too many minorities that want to trust the system. And so when people speak, although you're right and righteous with your emotion and your righteous indignation, other people are saying we have the right to have righteous indignation when it comes to our pocket, or when it comes to our lifestyle, or when it comes to our environment. If we see crimes in the streets and stuff like that, we see homelessness and it's ballooned, we got a problem with that, and we don't believe this person is the answer compared to that. So what? They might have insulted a bunch of people. We don't like it, we hate it, but in the end, it's not more important than my pocketbook or my lifestyle.
For decades, Democrats have created a cycle of dependency, breaking up families, trapping people in poverty, and ensuring their votes election after election. Think about it. The poorest communities are kept reliant on government handouts, and Democrats are happy to keep the benefits flowing, as long as it keeps them in power. That's why other ethnic groups are more evenly split between parties. But Democrats? They're all about power and control. Their platform has become increasingly radical, catering to the extreme woke left. It's not about helping people. It's about staying in charge. The Democrat Party's strategy is simple. Keep people dependent. Keep them angry. Keep them voting blue. They've convinced entire communities that they're powerless without government intervention. But here's the truth, that the government isn't the solution, it's the problem. And let's break it down. 1. The welfare trap. Welfare is supposed to help those in need, but in reality, it's created a cycle of dependency that's incredibly hard to escape. Instead of lifting people out of poverty, it keeps them stuck there. And who benefits? Politicians who promise even more handouts in exchange for votes. Democrats claim they care about education, but what have they actually done? They push policies that will keep failing schools open, ayuchan, trapping kids in broken systems. Meanwhile, they fight against school choice, which would give parents the power to send their kids to better schools. Why? Because they don't want families to have options. They want them to stay reliant on the system. Democrats love to talk about fairness and equality, but their policies hurt the very people they claim to help. High taxes, overregulation, and reckless spending don't create jobs, they destroy them. Small businesses, the backbone of the economy, get crushed under red tape and bureaucracy, and who suffers the most? Hardworking, middle-class families trying to get ahead. Democrats don't actually want to fix these problems. They need them to exist. If people are struggling, they're more likely to vote for the party that promises to help. It's a vicious cycle designed to keep them in power. This isn't about helping people. It's about controlling them.